What if the Vikings didn't just raid Poland? They helped shape it. What if the Viking legacy of Poland didn't begin with blood, but with amber, alliance, and brotherhood? The sea didn't roar that morning. It breathed. A shallow inhale across the Baltic gray sky, gentle as silk, carrying with it the scent of salt, smoke, and something metallic. Kazimir stood barefoot on the pebble shore just outside Gdańsk, the dawn fog curling around his ankle like a shallow tide pool. He was small, maybe 10 winters old, but his eyes, they saw everything. A ship had appeared like a ghost through the mist, its curled prow rising like the head of a beast, carved into the shape of a serpent with an emerald eye. It made no sound, no war cry, no horn blast, just the creak of pine wood and the flap of a faded sail, striped red and black. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. Vikings, the sea wolves, monsters from the north who burned towns and stole children, who spoke in snarls and laughed when they killed, and were killed. But this ship didn't match the stories. These Norsemen wore furs and cloaks, but no blood stained their axes, and no torches were in their hands. They stepped from the ship slowly, cautiously, as if they weren't sure what the meeting would bring. Kasimir's older brother, Brannick, moved first. At 17, he'd already had the shoulders of a warrior and the calm of a merchant. Their father, a respected elder in the coastal settlement, had taught him to read a man's worth in the tilt of his chin. Kasimir watched as Brannick stepped forward and raised a hand, the old sign of peace. 2 fingers extended, palm out. A Norseman stepped to meet him, tall as an ox, blonde braids streaked with gray. His cloak was fastened with a brooch carved like a sunwheel. He didn't smile, but his eyes didn't lie. He nodded once, raised the same hand, palm forward. No blades were drawn, only barrels, salt, fur, iron, silver, heavy in leather pouches and thunked across the sand. Kasimir's father stepped forward last, the man who never bowed, not to Saxon nor Roos. He extended a hand, rough with years of chopping pine and hammering nails. The Norsemen took it. They shook. That was the moment. The pact was formed. No scrolls, no seals, no gods called to witness, just a handshake beneath pine branches and cries. The boy did not know it then, but something changed that morning, and the story's ending changed too. The years that followed were like a tide coming in, going out, but never silent. Longships became more common in the bay. Trade sprouted like mushrooms near the shore. Silver bought Slavic amber. Salt from the fjords preserved Baltic fish. Bronze brooches engraved with runes passed into the hands of the Polish weavers. Brannick learned their tongue, Kasimir too. At night they whispered Norse words around the fire. The Norsemen didn't just bring goods, they brought stories, laughter, strange songs sung low under the moon. A bearded warrior taught Kasimir how to shape a blade against the grain, how to grip an axe as if it were part of his own arm. And in return, Kasimir showed him how to smoke herring so it wouldn't rot before winter. He also taught them the local herbs, what was used for fevers and for wounds. They weren't so different, he realized. The Norsemen bled red just like he did. One night by the fire, the blonde Norseman, his name was Hrolf. He spoke plainly. I have sons your age, back home. Maybe one day they'll meet yours here. Maybe mine will stay. Kasimir remembered blinking hard into the flames. It had never occurred to him that a Viking would want to stay. But peace is a delicate thing, like a fishing net made of spider silk, strong only if no one pulls too hard. And it was Brannick who heard the rumors first, from a trader who had come down the Vistula. Another Norse crew had entered the bay further north. The sail bore no red, only black. Rolf didn't know them, nor did he trust them. Some come for coin, he warned, and some come for fire. Kasimir didn't want to believe it, not after all these years, not after they taught each other to fight and to feast. But one day, the wind shifted. Kasimir was older now, 15 winters. calloused hands and a scar beneath one eye. He woke before the sun. The air smelled strange, not of salt and pine, of smoke. He climbed the bluff, looking to the sea, and there they were. Another longship, black-sailed. No song on the wind, no laughter, just silence, and the shape of death painted on its hull. Kazmir ran down from the bluff to the town because he knew what stories come next. But this isn't a story about Kazmir. This happened again and again. Along the Polish coast, Vikings didn't just raid, they rewrote the rules. Some came with axes, others came with open hands. And the truth? It's buried somewhere in between. To understand the longships on Kazmir's shore, we must first understand the world they sailed into, the Baltic Sea. The sea wasn't just a water, it was a superhighway, from the fjords of Norway to the forests of the Rus, from Denmark's islands to the windswept coast of Poland. This inland sea was an artery of northern Europe's power, and Poland was the beating heart where the Slavic earth met Viking ore. By the 9th century, the Polish coast was a swirl of tribes, and each with their own language, gods, and ambitions. No king yet, just warlords and elders, each guarding their land and their rivers like gold. But gold didn't run through Poland. Something else did. Amber. The ancient resin called the gold of the north. It had been traded through the lands for thousands of years. Roman emperors wore it, Egyptian pharaohs hoarded it. The Vikings, they wanted it. Badly. But amber wasn't all they were after. Poland's rivers, especially the mighty Vistula, they were natural highways, stretching from the Baltic deep into the Slavic heartland. Control the river, and you control the crossroads of Europe. This made towns like Trousseau and Gdańsk and Wolin more than just markets. They were prizes. Wolin, especially, held a near-mythic status in Norse lore, known in some sagas as Jomsborg. It may have housed a legendary fortress of elite Viking warriors known as the Vikings, a kind of proto-knightly order with a code stricter than any king's. Whether or not Jomsborg truly existed in Wolin, we do not know for certain. But we do know this: Norse and Slavic peoples lived side by side there. They traded, built homes, even shared burial grounds. Archaeologists have uncovered Viking-style swords buried with Slavic ornaments. Long houses with mixed designs, Slavic idols besides Thor's hammer. Not war, weaving. And yet, war was always near. Sometimes Vikings came as merchants, sometimes as mercenaries, sometimes as monsters. One of Poland's early leaders is said to have employed Norse warriors as bodyguards and raiders for hire. Just like the Rus to the east, Polish leaders saw the Vikings not as pets, but as tools. When alliances formed, Northmen helped fight off rival tribes. When these alliances broke, well, the raiders knew the land and the terrain very well. But this wasn't a one-sided story. Slavic warriors also joined Viking bands, learned Norse tactics, and raided alongside their northern brothers. Cultural lines blurred, names blurred, even gods began to overlap. In places like Wolin, Odin didn't displace Slavic deities, he stood among them. The result? A strange hybrid world, where Viking longships docked beside Slavic trading canoes, where a Norse warrior might marry the daughter of a Polish elder, where weapons from Scandinavia sat on market tables beside amber beads, honey cakes, and smoked herring, where the sound of Norse and Slavic blend taverns like fire and mead. This was not an empire. It was a brotherhood, fragile, shifting, but real. Until it wasn't, because peace was profitable, but betrayal was always one sail away. You think you know Viking history? You think you know the Viking story? They came screaming out of the sea with axes in hand and fire in their wake. They raided monasteries, burned towns, took slaves. That's the Viking script we've all been handed, the one written in ash and blood. But Poland never fit the script. Because in the forest and along the rivers of the Baltic coast, something else happened. Something quieter, something harder to notice if you're only listening for the clash of swords. The Norse didn't just raid Poland, they stayed. And amber was just the beginning. Salt, iron, grain, fur, honey, silver, these were the riches of the Slavic land, and the Norse knew it. So they came, not with fire, not always. Sometimes they came with silver, with barrels of mead, with gift and wives and brotherhood in mind. Let's look at Wollin, a major port on Poland's northwest coast. By all accounts, it became one of the richest trading towns in the Baltic. There's no debating what they found beneath the town. Scandinavian-style longhouses, Slavic-style pottery, tools and ornaments from both cultures in the same homes. Burial sites where Viking swords lay beside Slavic jewelry. That's not evidence of conquest. That's evidence of interweaving. One man, one grave, a sword forged in Norway, a pendant carved with a Slavic symbol for protection, a coin in his mouth bearing the mark of a Polish duke. Across the Vistula Delta and along the trading routes, the pattern repeats. Take Trousseau, a port town. Excavations there reveal goods from Scandinavia and Central Europe, but more telling was the architecture. Norse longhouses built with Slavic furnishes, Slavic hearths with Norse-style smoke vents. This wasn't a Viking fort or a Slavic village. It was both. And the people who lived there, they drank from carved drinking horns and wore Slavic linen robes. They worshiped Thor on Tuesday and offered grain to the Slavic household spirits on Thursday. They learned to speak in the Norse tongue. Maybe they were neither Norse nor Slav, but were Baltic. Still not convinced? Let's look at the money. In 2022, archaeologists discovered a hoard of silver coins near Gdańsk. Among them were Danish and Swedish coins, but more intriguing were the hybrid pieces. One side, a Thor's hammer, runic inscriptions. The other side, Slavic royal symbols and Christian crosses. These weren't standard coins. These were collaborations, likely minted for trade fairs where Norse and Slavic leaders met, maybe even agreed to joint rule over trading posts. These coins tell a different story than raids and fire. They tell of negotiation, of commerce, and mutual respect. And the story rises higher, into palaces. We even have both textual and archaeological evidence that Norse warriors were employed in Poland as personal guard, not slaves, not conquered men, hired blades, trusted, feared, paid well. These weren't the ones who plundered Polish land. These are the ones who helped unify it. This practice continued for centuries, borrowing Viking muscle for internal conflicts, tribal wars, foreign diplomacy. In some ways, it mirrors what the Rus princes did further east, using Norse mercenaries to legitimize power and protect trade. The difference? Poland didn't just use the Vikings, it absorbed them. So why don't we know this? Because peace fades. War leaves ruin. Peace leaves roads. Roads get repaved. You remember Lindisfarne because it bled. You remember Paris because it burned. But you don't remember Trousseau's marketplaces, where Slavic and Norse craftsmen sold side by side. You don't remember the long summer evenings when shared ale and amber built empires without swords. But the soil remembers. Every hybrid grave, every dual script coin, every half-forgotten word pressed down in both tongues. They whispered something, strange and wonderful. Vikings didn't just leave scars in Poland, they left a legacy. And if that's all true, if the Norse did live among the Slavs, marry their daughters, defend their towns, then what happens when these bones are betrayed? What happens when one longship returns not with silver, but with fire? That is where we're headed next, because history's most dangerous sword isn't the one pointed at your chest. It's the one that once guarded your back. And they say every blade has two edges. One cuts your enemy, the other turns on you. That is, if your grip falters. In the Baltic, in the shadow groves of Poland's north, the sword of Norse loyalty was tested, and not every blade held. Because for every Viking who traded in trust, there were others who sailed back into the bay under black sails, with torches, not trinkets. And Poland did bleed. But here's where the story turns. This is not about betrayal, not really. This is about what happened next, when the raiders came, and the Norsemen, who had become brothers, didn't flee. They fought. Let's go back to Volin. Yes, the town that was rich. Yes, it was filled with traders and weavers and clever folk who knew how to survive. But when the rogue Viking bands attacked, crews with no honor, no alliance, who stood on the shield wall beside the Slavs? No. Polish chronicles describe coastal towns that raised militias made of both locals and long-settled Norse warriors. These weren't mercenaries anymore. These were sons, sons-in-law, landowners, friends, and when it came time to defend Gdańsk, Trousseau, or smaller villages deep up the riverways, they stood shoulder to shoulder. They had to, because they no longer fought for gold. They fought for home. One tale recorded in later chronicles and echoed in folklore memory tells of a Norseman who had married into a Slavic clan and settled near the Vistula. When a Danish raiding crew struck the coast and took his village by surprise, the Norsemen rode north through the night to rally other Norse settlers, and by dawn, a group of local Norse and 5 longships crept into the fog, not to raid, but to retake the village. When the Danes saw who opposed them, men in Norse mail, speaking their tongue, they hesitated. But the locals gave no quarter. They were Vikings once, he declared. Now they were Poles. This is the twist that no one expected, that in Poland, the Vikings didn't remain a foreigner. They converted. Not just to Christianity, though many did, but to identity. They married Polish women, their children spoke Polish and Norse, their sons learned to swing the Slavic axe and plow Baltic soil. When they fought for Poland's rivers and Poland's grain and Poland's gods, or later, even for Poland's cross. And that shift, it was powerful, because it didn't happen at the top in a castle or palace. It happened in farmsteads, in forests, in fields of rye and barley, where Norse blades were laid down and Polish roots grew up around them. DNA studies have confirmed what legend always hinted at. A strand of Scandinavian blood flows through the veins of many northern Poles. But it's not Viking blood. It's brotherhood blood. The kind that fought side by side at the river crossings. The kind that stood in the shield wall, not as mercenaries, but as brothers of choice. Now, where is this seen more clearly than in the tactical evolution of early Polish warfare? Take the round shield. Once considered purely Norse design, it shows up in Polish burials. Not stolen, adopted and altered. And the use of the axe in the shield formations, identical to Viking raid tactics, later refined for use in forest skirmishes and river ambushes by Slavic warbands. The battlefield became the classroom. And in that classroom, Vikings learned Poland, and Poland learned to fight like Vikings. They didn't just survive the Norse, they evolved with them. Let's go even bigger. The very idea of Poland as a unified kingdom, that didn't happen in a vacuum. In 966, a Polish ruler had the whole nation baptized. He didn't do it from a position of desperation. He did it from a position of strength. And that strength was built on the alliance, trade, and military consolidation made possible by Baltic partnership. Viking alliances helped the Polish ruler crush his rival tribes, and helped him protect the Amber Roads, and helped him ensure the Vistula remained his river. Sure, the baptism was political, but guess who helped him hold the line? Vikings. By then, many were already Christians, converted in Denmark or baptized in Poland itself. They weren't just sword hands anymore. They were defenders of a new Christian kingdom, their kingdom. Poland wasn't shaped in isolation, it was hammered into form by many hands, Slavic, Norse, and beyond. We tell the story of the Viking Age like it ends with a whimper in 1066 at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, the last raid, fading into black. But in Poland, the Viking legacy didn't end. It became something else. It became Polish. And you can still hear the echoes in the rhythm of the northern surnames, in the bone structure of Slavic descendants, in the legends passed down from father to son, not of terror, but of loyalty, strategy, and strength. This isn't a borrowed myth, it's an inheritance. So when you hear the word Viking, don't just picture the longship on the horizon. Picture the one tied to a Polish dock, the one repaired with Slavic timber, loaded with Slavic grain, rowed by Slavic arms and Norse arms together. Picture the warrior who didn't ride off into legend, but who stayed, who built, who fought, and who died, not as a raider, but as a defender of Polish soil. Let's transition back to our story. The smoke didn't rise, it crawled, low to the earth, hungry, like something alive. Kazimir stood on the hill above his village, feet in the frozen mud, heart beating like a war drum against his ribs. The black-sailed ship had arrived just before dawn, silent, shadowed, like a blade drawn in the dark. Now the flames licked the sky. He could hear the screams of goats, the shouting, the shattering of clay. He knew that sound, his father's shout, and beneath it, the thick, guttural roar of Norsemen. But these weren't Hrolf's men. They wore no sign of friendship, no tokens of alliance, no sunwheel brooches or clan braids, only steel and soot. These were not the Norse who shook hands beneath pine boughs. These were the others. He should have run. He should have hidden, because Mir was 15 now, a boy in name only. His hands had built walls, planted crops, pushed a blade into a fish and fur alike, and he was his father's son. He would not leave him to burn. He moved like a ghost through the trees, past the grazing paths, past the fence line, now crumpled like ribs under a hammer. He passed the market stall where he had once sold smoked eel, past the stone circle where Hrolf had sung Norse songs and taught them to dance in broken rhythm. The village center was a fire ring, and in the middle, his father, face bloodied, kneeling still, and behind him, a towering man, like an executioner. A Norseman in black mail, not Hrolf, but someone who once might have been his kin. Kazimir felt his legs lurch forward, not with thought, with fury, because just as the axe rose above his father's neck, another voice shouted from the trees, Norse, loud, familiar. Kazimir turned, Hrolf, the real one, and with him 50 others, his brothers, settlers, friends, a shield wall, not raised for war or plunder, but for honor. Their axes gleamed, not with greed, but with resolve. You sail into our rivers, Hrolf roared. You burn our kin, you call yourselves Norse. He spat on the ground. Then today, the Baltic will drink your blood. What happened next, Kazimir would replay in his dreams for years. The clash of steel, the wet crack of shield meeting jaw, the shouts of three tongues, Slavic, Norse, and the universal cry of rage and grief. Kazimir reached his father, dragging him to the side, tending to his wounds with trembling hands and with the herbs his mother had taught him to carry. All while men he once called monsters defended his home like lions. When the battle ended and the threat was gone, under the overcast sky and the chill of damp sea air, they buried two bodies, one Slavic, one Norse, side by side, brothers in death as they had become brothers in life. The next day, the villagers rebuilt, together. Hrolf's men hammered new beams beside Kazimir's uncles. Kazimir's cousins offered bread to the Norse boy who had taken a spear in the leg. Kazimir was Polish, but his heart had become Norse. And little did he know, his son would be both. Because this is what history forgets. It forgets the battles fought for each other. It forgets the shields that turned towards their neighbor, not against them. Kazimier's village stood not because of bloodlines, but because of loyalty. Because some Vikings didn't come to conquer, they came and became Polish. And if you stand today in northern Poland, where the wind tastes like salt and pine, you may hear the same sea. You may walk the same path Kazimir walked, and beneath your feet lies bones of both bloods, buried not in hate, but in brotherhood. When the smoke clears and the shouting fades and the graves are dug, what remains? The question that history rarely answers, but story does. Kazimir's world didn't end the day the black-sailed ship arrived. It began again, in ash, in trust, in sacred scars. Because the deeper truth in Poland's Viking past is not found in who held the sharper sword. It's in who stayed when everything was burning. And that teaches us something we still need today. Brotherhood is a choice, not a birthright. The Norse who fought for Poland were not born into its soil. They weren't entitled to loyalty. They earned it with action, with sacrifice, and showing up when it mattered most. True brotherhood isn't sealed by blood. It's sealed by what you bleed for and what you're willing to rebuild. The easy path is the axe. Take it, burn it, leave it. But the harder, more noble way, that's the path of co-creation. What built Poland's north coast wasn't conquest. It was trust between rivals, goods exchanged under risk, and honor shared across language and faith. Trade said, we see value in one another, and that act of seeing is the seed of peace. Slavs didn't lose themselves by mixing with Vikings. They didn't become weaker. They became stronger, more capable, because identity, when rooted deep, doesn't shatter when tested. It grows new branches. To be Polish meant to absorb, adapt, and rise stronger. The Norse didn't erase Polish culture. They helped it evolve. And sometimes the very thing we fear will dilute us is what prepares us for greatness. No one expected Hrolf to return, not after years of quiet, not when it meant risking everything. But he came back, because real friends don't disappear when war returns. They run towards the fire, when they stand beside you not out of duty, but out of love. That's not just alliance, that's legacy. Poland's northern soil holds bones of men who once would have called each other enemies. But they died as brothers, not because history willed it, but because they chose it. And that is the lesson that haunts and heals. What we build together will always outlast what we burn apart. So ask yourself, what are you building? A life of walls and suspicion, or a life where strangers become allies and allies become family? Poland's Viking story isn't just history, it's hope. The past isn't gone, it's walking beside us. Walk the streets of Gdańsk, and you'll find Viking runes etched into old stones. In northern Polish villages, surnames still carry echoes of Norse roots. DNA studies show that many Poles carry Scandinavian ancestry, not from conquest, from coexistence. Even Poland's political DNA, alliances built across tribes, pragmatic unity under pressure, strategic blending of cultures can be traced to this Baltic brotherhood. It's in how Poland has always stood at a crossroads between East and West, and chosen not to break, but to bind. Even in today's fractured world, this story speaks. Peace can be made without surrendering strength. Identity doesn't weaken through connections, it's refined. People who help you rebuild become part of your legacy. And maybe, just maybe, when you sit at a Polish table, share laughter over fish and bread, or walk the rivers where longships once sailed, you're not just living in the aftermath, you're living in the continuation. You've walked with Kazimir, you stood at the edge of the Vistula, with fire in the sky and loyalty in the dirt. And now you know the truth. Vikings didn't just raid Poland, they rooted themselves there. They buried sons in the soil. They fought beside Slavic warriors. They bled for villages they once saw as foreign. If you have Baltic blood, Norse blood, or simply believe something greater than blood, then this story is yours. So don't let it stay buried. Share this episode with someone who thinks they know Viking history. Send it to a friend with Polish roots or Norse roots. Share the powerful lessons that the Viking Age has demonstrated for us. And until next time, be bold, be strong, and awaken the Viking in you.